And my piece is actually very short and much lighter weight than Google. I will talk a little bit about a trip I did recently last month to Nairobi for Flutter Forward. Flutter Forward is a conference organized by Google, and it's basically one of their big marketing events that they use to kind of announce new developments and so on. It is, like many of you, I don't even know how I heard about it. I think I got an email somewhere in October already for this virtual event streamed out of Nairobi. I signed up for the virtual thing and then forgot about it. And a month later, I got the surprise email from Google inviting me to attend in person, flying to Nairobi and attend in person, which is like the coolest thing ever. Like I said, it's a bit of a marketing event, but it is an opportunity for Google to kind of focus all their energy once a year and kind of release a lot of new stuff and get kind of a little bit of excitement around Flutter. They had the first of these types of events to 2018, Flutter Live, then Flutter Interact. Engage was online, and now this was the first one in person again, or semi-person. I mean, it was a fairly small team in Nairobi, but still, you know, it was like with attendance. Lots of new material, lots of talk about what has happened in the last year, but also what will happen in the future. And then Google also used that event as kind of the first really big commitment to Africa. I think it's the first keynote-style event that they did in Africa, in Nairobi, where they're trying to build up a new development system thing. All right, so we heard from Ugo's talk that there are not many Flutter developers in the room. I actually think you guys are underplaying. I know a few of you didn't raise your hands who are doing Flutter, so I think the statistics are slightly better here. But just to get everybody in the mood again, this is a direct quote from Tim Sneath, who is the head of product of Flutter. He said this during his keynote, and I wasn't sure I could play the video, so I'm reading it to you. For those of you who haven't spent much time in Flutter, we are an open source portable UI toolkit designed to enable beautiful, fast experiences on any platform. With Flutter, we want to unleash you to build, test, and deploy beautiful mobile, web, desktop, and embedded applications from a single code base. Now, I'm not quite challenging my inner Tim here. He is a very engaged speaker, and you must listen to him. It sounds better when he says it. But you get the idea. So this thing in Nairobi was a 2-day event. In the run-up, there was 17 days of Flutter campaign with lots of new videos and code labs released day after day. Then the highlight of the entire thing was clearly the keynote. But that wasn't all. There was a few technical workshops in the run-up, Ask Me Anything sessions, and so on. And then on the second day, it was a little more private. There was a Flutterista panel. Flutterista is a network of female Flutter engineers that is independent from Google. It came out of Google, it's now independent. And so these are the panelists, kind of a lot of famous names in the Flutter community. And then afterwards, it was the community day where they invited a lot of Kenyan developers to attend various events about the Google Dev environment and you know, not only Flutter but also kind of GDG stuff and so on. And then in addition to that, so basically everything I experience here, you can, you know, everything is recorded, everything is published. There is a nice website now where you can watch all the videos. So all the material is available and was launched kind of in that week. So for the rest of this brief talk, I'll talk a little bit about the keynote. Actually, I think we're doing good on time. So they started with highlighting again the 5 pillars that are important to the Google team. So this isn't exactly rocket science, but I think it's interesting to think back of what the Google team is focusing on. Beautiful stands for pixel perfect applications. As a Flutter engineer, you have complete control over what's on your screen. Fast talks about the user experience, Flutter applications. They strive to make it as efficient, as fast as possible, and then as we heard from Ugo's talk before, there are a lot of ways to make that possible. Productive refers to the developer productivity. So for us as developers, they're really thinking of us, they're providing tools, and they are not only having the end user in mind, but also as us as developers. Portable refers to the fact that you have a single code base and you can target more and more different platforms from that code base. And then finally, open refer to the fact that everything is open source, you're not dealing with any licensing mess or so. So basically this is kind of what is at the core of their mindset and what drives their innovation. This is one of the few slides very early on, just a few numbers I want to quote. The most impressive one, 700,000 plus Flutter apps, and this doesn't even count the 5 or so MVPs that I have sitting around that never made it to the Play Store. I mean, even without my little contribution, this is amazing. And the other thing that blew me away that I really wasn't aware of, according to GitHub, the Flutter framework is among the top 3 products on GitHub judged by community contributions. So, you know, it is open source and it is a super active environment, which kind of puts my mind at ease because, you know, we always wonder, you know, Google has abandoned projects in the past, you know, it's always a little bit in the back of my head, like, are they in it for the long run? And I think they are, I'm very sure about that. So the first part of the keynote was about kind of where they are at the moment. Right before the event, they launched Flutter 3.7. The most interesting piece of that release is a lot more support for Material 3 and still more coming, and the experimental release of a graphics rendering engine, which you'll hear about later. Most of that component, I don't want to list too many technical things because of time, but what I thought was interesting is they showcased 4 different companies. The most important one was Flutter Flow. I think there are some people here at Specno who use Flutter Flow and have very good experience, made good experience with it. They actually invited the 2 co-founders, Abel and Alex, on stage to do an amazing demo. They built an app from scratch, fairly complex app, kind of, you know, reading in images from a public API and then presenting them, providing search, everything. They did that in a course of like 3 or 4 minutes through a Visibig interface, which is, you know, pretty impressive, I have to say. So that was Flutter Flow. Then Widgetbook is about facilitating the cooperation between the developer and the designers on the team. PUBG Mobile is, I think they're Chinese, Asian company, gaming company that apparently has 1 billion users on their game. And they talked about incrementally switching over one component at a time to Flutter in a running system that they cannot afford to break. I mean, 1 billion is like, wow. And then the last use case was Google Classroom, where that team focused on ease of development and made a case on how they saved a lot of developer time when they switched to Flutter. So all of these were kind of, you know, existing products that show kind of where the industry is going with this framework. And then they completely switched gears in the keynote and talked a lot more about the future. What's coming. The disclaimer here was that the demos that they showed now were really awe-inspiring, but none of this is quite ready yet. They don't make any promise on when it's coming and how exactly it will look when it comes, but this is stuff that they work on and they expect to release within the next like 6 to 12 months, I would think. They talked about 4 different areas and I'll cover them one by one now. The first one is the graphics performance. Here they had 3 different components really. One is the impeller rendering engine, which apparently provides fantastic performance improvements. It kind of provides performance improvements in any case, but especially in some edge cases, such as sophisticated SVG graphics. And then they talked about pixel shading, and they made a point that this is now available both for web and for mobile. And that allows for a whole slew of new applications. I'll show you in a second. I'll show you a very short demo. And then the last thing where they had an amazing demo was the 3D support. So just to look at one of the custom shader, let me see if I can do this. Yes. So this is like, I found this on Twitter. This is somebody who built a quick demo with this custom shader thing. This is like a random image, a NASA image, and he added the animation. And it is beautiful and quick and fast, and you can imagine, you know, how Flutter applications will look in a year or two. Okay, this was from another pixel shader demo that they showed live. They showed how Dash is pixelated, less pixelated, and all of that, again, super performant. That was from the 3D demo. They started with a Blender model, made it 3D, and then kind of replicated this into this gigantic cube, and then started to manipulate the cube. And, you know, without any jitter, without freezing, with like totally seamless. The next pillar they talked about was the seamless integration, and they focused, they talked about both web and mobile separately. And the web demo, and this is the most amazing demo of the entire event. It's like when you watch the keynotes, you hear kind of a little bit of audio played in, you know, there's polite clapping and whatever. In the room on the day, I never realized how much they downplay the room audio. There was like really cheers, and you know, we were all like, wow, when we saw this. So let me not wow you, let me show you what they did. This is about Flutter element embedding. And I thought I had done this larger. Okay, so Flutter for the web has been around for a while, but typically the idea is you take over the entire screen, right? So now with element embedding, they will allow you to take a Flutter widget and drop it into a div into your app. And now, so you have this Flutter widget, which is basically compiled down to JavaScript in a div, and you have the rest of your website, HTML, JavaScript, and the two can interact. So I have, surprise, surprise, the usual counter app here, which, let me see if I have, yes, here's my mouse. Okay, so I don't know, there's something odd happening here on the screen. I think it has to do with the fact that I made it smaller. Okay, so here I can increment, and you can see how on the HTML side, my counter increments as well. Now that's great, it goes both ways, but that's just the start. I can now start shading it. I can do a mirror. I can resize it. All of this is just HTML. Sorry, I'm covering the screen here. But now let's get really fancy here. Let's turn this into a device mode. So this was when there was like, wow in the room. And let's get rid of the device. Actually, let's keep the device mode and start adding a text field here. And now I'll type a little bit. Oops. Once again, this is a bit hard to use here. Okay, I slightly mistyped this, but you see, basically, I'm treating this as a web page. My Flutter widget. So let's take the device mode off again, and let's do a bit of spin. Now my text is spinning here. Once again. Isn't this cool? And now I'm doing a very, very poor impression of Tim Sneath here. Do yourself a favor and watch the keynote, and watch especially this piece. It is absolutely worth it. Okay, I think I even included the YouTube video snippet here in case you want to see it for yourself. Okay, so in fact there is on the mobile side they talked about a better mechanism of calling native APIs. At the moment, as developers, we have to use plugins with method channels. Not the end of the world, but they are thinking of a way to make it so much easier to call out to native APIs. And the demo they showed was that of a pedometer that calls a native Android and iOS motion sensors. Okay, the next chapter was support for new and emerging architectures. The web developers here will probably have a meaning on WebAssembly. I don't, but I'll take their word for it that it's important and that it's supported now. But then they also start to support RISC-V, which apparently is a very new, not very new, hardware standard. And it's still super experimental, but they feel that by targeting the standard, they open up a new avenue for more embedded systems and more support for Flutter on embedded systems in the future. This is kind of more of a moonshot project, I had the feeling from the way they talked about it. And then finally, they are always happy to hear that they do keep us developers in their hearts as well. They previewed Dart 3, which now has 100% null safety, sound null safety. When I heard that, I wasn't initially too impressed because I have been kind of using null safety for a long time already. But actually, it turns out if it really is, the standard is baked into the language, you can start compiling into much more efficient code, so you get huge performance hits later in your runnables. Another interesting component that I thought caught my attention was the vertical toolkits. They did a games toolkit a year ago, and now they launched a news toolkit. And I know Specno here as an agency might have an interest in that. It's basically kind of a template for news agencies for streaming apps. And they showcased 3 different African companies from Morocco, Nigeria, and Kenya who reported back on their experience with this news toolkit. And then finally, they talked a little bit about the Wanderers app, which is a Flutter reference app. If you haven't tried it out, do yourself a favor and download it. It looks fantastic. It makes me really depressed because I know that, without graphic skills, I can never write a beautiful app like this. But it's nice to see kind of where the bar is. Okay, I think this is just a summary. I'm doing a poor impression again. This is like a super quick summary, but the whole keynote is about 1 hour and 20. It is like super slick produced, and it's a joy to watch. And if that's too much, you can follow all the news in a blog. In addition to the keynote event, there were a bunch of workshops, which I attended. The one I enjoyed most was the one on Material 3. They wrote a new kind of reference app called Basil, the cooking app. And they kind of showed the move to Material 3. And then there is a lot of additional content released on demand. So, was it worth it for me to fly all the way to Nairobi? It clearly was. I got a big kick out of, a big motivational boost out of all of this. I am super excited to see what Google has in the pipeline. Some of the more experimental things I know won't affect me all that much because my work is typically not too graphics heavy and kind of not too fancy on the design side. But I decided for myself I'll target a little bit of Material 3 and adaptive design in my next projects. But also, basically all the material, all the talks I attended there on the day are available for everybody. There's no need to fly to Nairobi for that. But what I really got huge benefit from was the networking effect, because there were so many of the Flutter stars in the same hotel for the 2 days that it was like fantastic to put names to all the people I follow on Twitter for years now. This, for example, is Nilay, former GDG and now Google employee and instrumental Flutterista. And yeah, she is one of many people I had kind of known the names of and now got to meet in person. So, just here are the most important references, and I stayed 1 extra day afterwards and did a quick safari, and that is a safari. Questions?